What's up, guys? Welcome to Read Instead. I'm Jake. Glad to have you here today. We're going to be talking about the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. Stick around. Okay, a trilogy written between 1995 and 1997 by British author Bernard Cornwell. 3 books, obviously, in the trilogy. Book number 1 being The Winter King. Book number 2, Enemy of God. Book number 3, Excalibur. Book number 1, The Winter King, opens up with our main protagonist, our narrator throughout the entire series, a man by the name of Durfal. Durfal lived his life knowing Arthur, being basically a disciple of Arthur, and at the very beginning of Winter King, he has reached old age, he has converted to Christianity, and he's in his room, his keep, and he's made to stay there and write out, because the very few people can read or write during the 5th century in England, and he's one of them, and he's petitioned by basically his boss, a bishop, to write out a gospel, the Gospel of Matthew, if I remember correctly. But because the local princess, a young girl, teenager it seems, comes to his room and wants to know everything there is to know about his relationship with King Arthur and the stories surrounding his legend and what was going on in and throughout England during that time. She wants to know everything there is to know about Arthur. She asks him to tell her what happened, and instead of writing down the gospel in which he's supposed to be writing, he says, I'm just going to write the story out completely of my life and the life of King Arthur. And that basically begins the narrative of the entire story within these 3 novels. And very much like if you guys have ever seen, The Princess Bride, how Fred Savage, the kid, is in his bed, and it keeps going back to that narration of his grandfather reading him the story of The Princess Bride. That continues to happen all throughout the series. It goes back to that scene of Durfal in his room with the princess, continuously asking questions about King Arthur. Okay, so because there's so much plotting and so much, the story is pretty fast-paced all throughout these 3 novels. I'm not going to give you guys, as I usually do with my reviews, I sort of kick you off in, the right direction as the very beginning of the plot. Usually, like, where the plot tends to grab me, I'll just give you guys that much to see if it grabs you, and hopefully it encourages you to read the series on your own. There's really just so much sort of going on within the plot that I'm not going to do that this time. I'm just sort of going to give you an overview of what the series is about. First, I think it's important to establish, King Arthur, right? Most people in the West have heard this name, and they think maybe the Knights at the Round Table, or they think, King Lancelot and the fighting, or Guinevere, his love, and all these sort of different mythological legends that we put together with King Arthur. And I think it's important to remember that why is there so much sort of legend and folklore surrounding King Arthur? This is what we know. There most likely was a man named Arthur who was a warrior during the 5th century in England. And he sort of rose throughout the ranks. That's just about all we know of him historically. And I think that's the reason why authors all throughout literature and have really had the freedom to sort of make up their own stories surrounding him. So, genre-wise, I guess this would fall into historical fiction, but it's historical, like real fiction. I mean, most of this is fiction. Like I said, all we know is that there was probably a warrior named Arthur who fought during a time when England was basically, we think of England as one island today, and it's one nation. Earlier, 1,500 years ago, for hundreds of years during the Dark Ages, England was divided up into different kingdoms within the island, and they all sort of continued to fight, and different kingdoms within England held political sway at different times, and there was a lot of sort of conquest that was going on during that time, and that's certainly what this series is about, but it's about so much more than that too. Okay, so one of the things that I love about this series is, it's all, like I said, it's all through the eyes of this man named Derfel, and it's so realistic. That's what's cool about this. This isn't like fantasy in any way. It really shows you how grim and dark it was to live during this time in the Dark Ages. But it really, the coolest thing is that it humanizes King Arthur, and it shows his flaws. And I read this series at least a couple years ago now, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, and the thing that I still remember about it today are those times when, before a battle was coming, or after a battle had taken place, or when the army that King Arthur was leading had, sort of stationed itself in the ruins of an old Roman castle or something like that. Derfel would sort of get away with Arthur and have these really sort of intimate conversations, and they would talk about the importance of keeping an oath, and they would talk about like their inner struggles, and King Arthur would talk about how he wants to be a good father to his children, and it really humanized Arthur, like I said, and that's I know that sounds sort of simple, but I just found that really intriguing. Another thing you guys should know, this is not, a Wizard of Earthsea, Harry Potter sort of PG rated, this isn't a PG rated story. Bernard Cornwell will, he will tell you, he will let you know how the entrails in someone's gut falls onto the ground after they get cut, with a sword in battle in the stomach, and then he'll tell you about how after the battle the dogs, come around and start, chewing on the the entrails that have come out. It's like that's what this is. I remember very vividly when I was first reading The Witcher King. I knew very little about this series when I was first sort of encouraged to read it. I just knew that it was popular, and a lot of people liked it. It was very highly regarded. But I remember very vividly reading The Witcher King and getting 20-25 pages in, and it just seemed like this little meeting was going to happen to establish some stuff in a local village, and somebody came to the door, and the guards at the door went to open it, but before that person could walk through, the guard took that person and cut their throat, and then I just remember reading that like, oh, that's what this is like. I had no idea that this is, it was going to be that sort of gruesome and vicious, but it is. I want to talk about the battle scenes. Bernard Cornwell has a way in which he writes battle scenes that is just so visceral and realistic, and the things that I remember about this, you'd have two armies sort of face to face, ready to go at it, and Bernard Cornwell would talk about sort of the mindset, and he would just make it so real. He would talk about how some men would sort of get a little drunk, and it would cause, they'd get so sort of stir crazy, they'd have to rile themselves up before they go into the battle. Some seasoned warriors would be, they'd almost be like, it'd be like bloodlust, you know what I mean? That they were hungry with their sword to, start chomping at the bit. And then they would talk about how some of the rookie soldiers, who was probably their first time in battle, were, urinating down their leg. And Bernard Cornwell has a way of describing the intricacies of battle. And another thing that they would do is, I suppose, I'm sure this is all historically accurate, but they would insult each other. You can imagine two armies facing each other. They both have, hundreds of men, and what they would do is a guy would come out and walk like a little ways ahead into the middle of the field and start shouting insults, profane insults, and I just remember reading the actual insults and being like, wow, that was really if somebody said that to me, that would stir me up too to want to go to battle. It was like really nasty stuff, and then actually, the way in which Cornwell describes after the two armies meet, and the two shield walls meeting, and the chomping and stabbing, and just the mindset that a soldier has in a battle like that is just very, very entertaining and riveting. Cornwell, I would say, is a master at writing battle scenes, especially medieval battle scenes. Okay, so like I said, guys, I'm not going to get too much. I could talk forever if I started to get into the real plot of this, so I'm not going to do that. But I can just assure you, from my point of view, that this series was entertaining from beginning to end. There's really not one book that's better than the other. They're all very, very good. The plotting and the political sort of political backstabbing, the trickery that goes on between the certain sides, and you see the motivation start to come to light of certain people, and it's super intriguing all the way through. It's wonderfully written. The dialogue is excellent. I just love from Durfel's point of view, and then it gives you Durfel's whole sort of personal life, how he begins to create. He's like a teenager when this series first opens up, and it obviously goes till he's a seasoned warrior, but it also shows his sort of starting his own family and stuff like that, and it's just it really humanizes something that has always, I think, been thought of as legend and folklore and mythology, and I really just love that about this series. So if anything I said today sounds interesting to you guys, I would highly encourage you to get this series. By the way, these 3 books are on Amazon. They look cool on your bookshelf, all matching lettering and stuff like that. So the Warlord Chronicles by Bernard Cornwell. I hope you guys check it out. Take care.